All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. This is a topic that I think is really important for all founders to hear. This is something that we talk about constantly at acquire.com. We're constantly, oh, we got someone in Colombia. There we go, Juan. Thanks for joining. Constantly going over with founders how to properly price your startup so you can successfully get acquired. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. As I'm going through this, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll do my best to get to them towards the end. But without further ado, let's get started. So valuations 2025, how much is your startup worth? So again, this is a topic that we go over so frequently at acquire.com and is candidly the number one reason we see startups not getting acquired. They price too high, they price incorrectly, they use a multiple that doesn't make sense. And I'll go over some examples of what to do when that happens and how to avoid it. Before I get into that, my name is Andrew Gazdecki. I am the CEO and founder of acquire.com. I've been fortunate enough to help literally thousands of founders get acquired over the past few years. Prior to acquire.com, I built and sold some startups of my own. I bootstrapped one to about 10 million in recurring revenue. That was a life-changing acquisition for me. And so I decided to build a company that helps other founders achieve something similar. I help founders exit smoothly pretty much all day long. And then my promise for this webinar, I'm going to show you how to price your startup right, attract serious buyers fast, and walk away with a higher cash offer. Okay, so why does this matter? Getting your valuation right is the key to a successful exit. You will attract serious buyers who see real value. The other side of this could be when you price incorrectly, serious buyers will just pass over your startup's opportunity and not look at it at all. You will also set the foundation for stronger negotiations. What this essentially means is when you price correctly, you typically will see more offers. And when you see more offers from buyers, that gives you more leverage in negotiations. There's a great quote: if you have one buyer, you have no buyers. And this is why pricing correctly is just so key in acquisitions. And you will also maximize both buyer interest and final valuation. To my last point, when you have multiple offers, this allows you to typically negotiate upwards. And so it may sound counterintuitive, but we always recommend pricing on the lower side to give you leverage in negotiations so you can increase the final valuation and your final sale price to really maximize your startup's acquisition. And kicking this off with an example. So last year, I spoke with a founder who built a profitable SaaS tool for real estate teams. He was at about 600,000 in recurring revenue. He listed it above 30% fair market value. He thought the tech was worth more. 6 months later, no serious offers. He relisted at fair market value and had 3 LOIs in a week. We see this so often where a founder will come to us. They'll look to go on acquire.com, list outside of recommended multiple ranges, and they will get literally zero interest from serious buyers. And then they will reprice to a multiple that makes more sense. And then almost immediately they will see a tremendous amount more of new interest from buyers. So the lesson here is don't price incorrectly. Buyers will simply ignore the opportunity. It won't even give you an opportunity to speak with them for them to hear your side on why this is a good acquisition opportunity. So valuations by the numbers. We have seen a shift that indicates profitability is king. And this is really what the majority of buyers on acquire.com are looking for. And it's important to put yourself in the buyer's shoes as well. How do they get to their valuation? How are they going to see a return on investment by acquiring my business or startup? And typically the answer there is through profitability, meaning they're going to acquire the business on a multiple of profit and then repay what they acquired the business for over time from cash flow from the business. So what do buyers look for? Profit multiples. Buyers want to acquire a business that is thriving. The name of the game is capital efficiency and profitability. Now, all day long as well, we're speaking with founders that are more interested in revenue multiples. And for good reason too. When you apply a revenue multiple, the value will be much higher. But justifying a revenue multiple without a really high growth rate is really hard to do, if not impossible. Buyers just don't see value in the same way as founders do in this situation. So we've all heard of the acquisition stories where Google acquires Wiz for 100 times revenue and outcomes like that. So it is possible. It's not the norm. It is something that is outside of what we typically see as a usual acquisition. And when you use a revenue multiple without an extremely high growth rate, we typically will see the listing fall flat, no acquisition takes place, buyers aren't interested. So that's why, again, valuation in terms of fair market value is so important. Pricing outside of how the market values your business decreases your odds of acquisition success dramatically. Pricing too high can deter serious buyers and not give you an opportunity to share why your business is worth acquiring. And this last point is key too. When you price your business accurately in terms of what other buyers are going to value the business at, that gives you the opportunity to have meetings with buyers, give them your perspective on why this is a good acquisition and where the opportunity is. When you price too high, most buyers will just skip over the listing entirely. And it's important to remember that most buyers are looking at hundreds of listings per day. And so when you're priced outside of fair market value, you don't even get a second look. So this is a good reference in terms of where you should price your startup. If you're below 100,000 in TTM revenue, 3 to 4 times profit, between 100,000 to a million, 3 to 5 times profit, and above a million, 3 to 6 times profit. And if you're wondering why do these numbers scale upwards as the businesses get larger, the reason for that is the buyer profile typically changes. Below 100,000 in revenue, you're probably going to be getting the most interest from first-time buyers, maybe executives at other tech companies, and other financial buyers. And as we move up the chain here, we're starting to see more traditional private equity firms, family offices, and even some strategic buyers. And then for revenue multiples, 1 to 3x below 100,000, 2 to 3x between 100,000 and 1 million, a million plus 2 to 4x. And again, it's important to state that if your business isn't operating literally to perfection, it just becomes very hard to justify a revenue multiple. The acquisitions that we see at acquire.com where they are successful, the deals close for all cash, those are almost always typically a profit multiple because again, this is what the majority of buyers that we work with are looking to value startups on. Now, the next question might be, okay, how do I justify a higher multiple? How do I get that super high multiple and really maximize my exit? Right at the top would be high profit margin. Again, sustainable operations is highly attractive to buyers. High year-over-year growth. This is where you're growing 100%, 200%, 300% per year. In every situation where we've seen a high revenue multiple, it's from high year-over-year growth. Without it, again, it makes sense to look more towards a profit multiple. And I had lunch recently with a friend who is running a startup, and his startup is at about $1 million in recurring revenue, and growth is kind of flat. He was wondering, how do I achieve a 3 to 5 times revenue multiple? I'd love to sell my business for $5 million. And I had to give him the bad news, where in those scenarios, no buyer is going to justify a high revenue multiple, and you need to start adjusting the business to prepare for a profit multiple, which means focusing on margin, looking at things such as more sustainable operations, lowering costs where you can. Other factors for a high multiple: low churn, large TAM, high product use, multiple years in business, strategic partnerships, and a dominant brand. The big one here, especially for SaaS companies, is going to be low churn. If you're growing really fast, but you have really high churn, it's going to be really hard to justify a high multiple in these scenarios as well, because the revenue is leaky and it's not going to have the same weight compared to a business with net negative churn and is also growing really fast. And when you sell your business, you need to think in terms of competition. There's a lot of other businesses looking to sell, and the ones that are priced most reasonably tend to get almost all of the interest from buyers. So you need to really be honest with yourself and look at your business. Where are you succeeding? Are you really profitable? Are you growing really fast? Is churn something that really stands out because it's so low? Or if it's none of the above, focusing on the margins, focusing on the operational efficiency of the business to really bring out the value that all buyers are looking for. And in terms of other markets that we see at acquire.com, and again, at acquire.com, we see about 3 acquisitions every single day. So these are numbers based on what we see every single day. This isn't us, selling hope or the dream. These are the multiples to use if you really want to sell your business and you want to do it quickly. So for e-commerce added here, we have 2 to 4 times profit or 1 to 2 times revenue. Marketplace, 2 to 3 times profit or 1 to 2 times revenue. And agencies, 1 to 3 times profit or 1 to 2 times revenue. And again, we rarely see acquisitions that go outside of these ranges. So if you price outside of these ranges, it may feel good initially. You may feel good in terms of this is what you could potentially sell for, but the odds are just stacked against you right at the beginning, and you're going to lose that initial buyer interest by viewing you as a realistic acquisition opportunity, and that's just going to reduce your chances of getting acquired at all, in my experience. Another example would be recently I was speaking with an e-commerce founder. He was at about 2.2 million in revenue, and he was using the completely wrong multiple. He was running an inventory heavy business with slim margins. Once he reset expectations, buyers flooded in. And this is another common scenario where if you're an e-commerce business and you're applying a SaaS multiple, or you're a newsletter business and you're applying a SaaS multiple, buyers are going to see right through that. Buyers are looking to acquire businesses within this specific range. And the way that they search on acquire.com as well is they will set their settings to only show businesses within these ranges. And if you're outside of it, you won't even show up in their searches. So once this adjustment was made, buyers flooded in. He was able to secure an LOI and successfully sell his business, which again is the difference between selling and not selling on acquire.com. So it isn't about lowering value. It's about matching the right multiple to the right business model. So understanding how buyers are perceiving your business and how they're valuing your business is absolutely critical to successfully getting acquired. Now, this image right here, I love sharing this, especially when I'm meeting with founders for the first time and they're thinking, where should I price? Where should the number be at? So on the left-hand side, we have fair market value, and it scales from negative 10% upwards to plus 10%. And on the right-hand side, we have serious buyer interest all the way down to 92%. So think at the bottom on the right-hand side, this is where the majority of buyers are going to be looking. And then as you scale up to the top, we have only 2% serious buyer interest. So essentially what this is showing is if you price 10% below fair market value, you're going to see 92% of serious buyer interest. But if you price 10% above fair market value, you're only going to see 2% of serious buyer interest. And the effects of this on an acquisition are dramatic, because the more buyers that are reviewing your opportunity, meeting with you, potentially submitting offers, that's going to increase your final acquisition outcome, because you have leverage in negotiations and you can improve terms, you can improve valuation. But if you're only speaking with a handful of buyers, you are completely dependent on that group submitting an offer, or you may not sell your business at all. The outcome that I think is my least favorite at acquire.com is when we see founders demanding to price really, really high to test out the market, which makes a lot of sense. I don't fault them for doing that. And their thought process is, let's just try pricing really high and then we could always lower it. The problem with that is you lose the first impressions with buyers, and you lose the impression that this is an acquisition opportunity where there is going to be a buyer. Because when you have one buyer, you truly have no buyers, and you give up all leverage in negotiations and negotiating terms and the final valuation. And so by coming in with a fair valuation, this allows you to speak with as many buyers as possible, find the best terms that you can negotiate, and then also the final valuation of the business, allowing you to sell for more at the end. Another example would be an agency. They were at 1 million in revenue, and this is where they saw a bidding war. So I've seen this situation a number of times. 2 identical agencies listed on acquire.com, same revenue, same profit, one priced 10% above fair market value and the other 5% below. So one was priced high, one was priced just about right. The overpriced one sat for months. The slightly underpriced one sparked a bidding war and sold above asking. This is a very, very common scenario where there are hundreds of businesses on Acquire. There's literally thousands. And so the ones that are priced over market value just completely get skipped over, but the ones that are priced fairly get all of the attention. There's a concentration of interest from buyers. And so that's where you really want to be thinking is, how do I maximize interest initially on acquire.com? Not how can I maximize my listing price, the price that's shown on the actual listing. You want to be focused on maximizing the amount of initial buyer interest, the calls, the back and forth questions, getting people excited about the business opportunity, because that's how you maximize the final acquisition price, not the number that you put on the listing because it makes you feel good and you might potentially find a buyer at that price point. Because the opposite happens. Buyers will skip over it, buyers don't take you seriously, no acquisition takes place, and then you end up at the same square that you really should have been starting at in the beginning. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll go through as many as I can towards the end. So moving on to what buyers care about. Winning with buyers. Again, buyers pay for profit, not potential. This is another big one. When we see founders listing on acquire.com with projected revenue, or if you acquire this business, it can easily 10x with the right marketing. That may be true, but the problem there is buyers aren't paying for the opportunity ahead that they can execute on. They're paying for what has been executed on today. And that's also what can cause a big gap in valuations. A listing above fair market value won't just sit, it won't get a second look. Lean operations and smart spending tell buyers your business can scale without waste. I think lean operations and managing margin in your business can be one of the best levers in an acquisition process, because when you're able to show a business that's just great to own, meaning it's profitable every single month, you're generating cash flow, those are businesses that every buyer wants to own, rather than the business that is spending a ton of money for growth, they're losing a ton of money each month, and there really isn't a straight line to a return on investment for really anyone, yourself or buyers. So when you're in those situations, it's really important to, again, put yourself in the shoes of a buyer and ask yourself, is this a good business worth owning? Meaning the revenue generated gives cash flow to the owner, and that's a reason to keep the business each and every single month. Realities of a good listing. First impressions with buyers are so critical. I cannot overstate this much, because you can't get that first impression back. So understanding the first impressions you have of buyers can be the difference between getting them excited about your business or having them move on to an opportunity they think is more reasonable. The typical private equity analyst is looking at 100 different startups per day, which is a lot. That could even be understated, because again, there's thousands of businesses available for sale. And so having everything they need to make a reasonable decision is key. So have the materials that most buyers require. Some private equity firms will acquire a business every single month. This is, again, because they are in the business of acquiring businesses. And so the more that you can match their expectations, the better. Your goal is to stand out, price correctly, and be a reasonable acquisition opportunity to the buyer. The key right here is acquisition opportunity, reasonable acquisition opportunity. Because if you appear unreasonable, it's going to be really hard to change the opinion of a buyer once that is one that they have. Recently, a founder told me, I thought my pitch deck would sell my startup, but private equity, unfortunately, they do not agree, and they scan hundreds of deals per day. Buyers don't fall in love with decks, they fall in love with clean P&Ls, retention metrics, and growth trends. Once he tightened up his financials, he went from ignored to acquired in 45 days. This is another scenario I see over and over on acquire.com, where a founder will put their listing on acquire.com and they don't have any supporting materials that buyers literally have to make a decision. They don't have a P&L, they don't have retention metrics, they haven't outlined the opportunity. And so the first question from a buyer is going to be, do you have these things? Do you have clean financials? Have you put together other materials that I could look at? And until they do, they're not going to be taken seriously by buyers. So preparation is also a huge aspect on acquisitions as well. We've done webinars on these in the past. If you're unsure about what specifically should you do to get prepared, if you're not sure, we're also happy to help you as well. But Again, when you go to market, you want to be reasonable. You want to have a accurate valuation. You want to be prepared in a way that just says you understand how buyers value your business. You understand the materials that buyers are going to need to make a decision. And you put in the work up front to make sure that you don't have any issues when you go to market. Keep in mind, price your startup at fair market value so you can close the gap between a buyer's expectations and yours. And that's really what you're trying to do when you sell your business is you may value it one way and a buyer may value it another way, and your job is to close that gap. And the best way to do that is to understand what is a fair market price for your business. How did you get to that valuation so you can defend it with buyers when they ask and really close that gap? Because there's always going to be the scenario where a buyer is going to value your business less than you are because they're trying to pay the least and you're trying to sell your business for the most. And so it's a natural tension that buyers and sellers have. So you want to understand where is the middle ground and how do you close that gap? And one of the best ways to do that is through competition, having as many buyers interested in your business as you possibly can when you go out to market, being prepared, having the materials that give buyers the ability to assess your company and if it's something worth pursuing. And again, staying away from some of the common pitfalls that we see specifically around pricing too high or using the wrong multiple, or just not having a valuation that you can defend and doesn't have any basis in reality. Why is this all important? Pricing your startup correctly is the difference between selling and not. Again, we see this literally every day. I was talking to a founder just this morning who went live on acquire.com. He priced over market value and was going back to reduce his price. And once he did, he saw interest spike. And again, it just delayed the process of finding a serious buyer and successfully selling his business. So that the first one cannot be overstated. The high price tag you may want is not real. That's definitely true. I know it can feel good going out with a high valuation, but it just ends up hurting you later when you speak to buyers and they're not sure how you got to the valuation or their expectations are completely different than yours. The valuation you may want doesn't match what the buyer is looking for. This point right here is just saying to understand where buyers are going to value your business and do the best you can to close the expectations gap. Because you'll look more credible, buyers will take you more seriously, and you'll be able to sell your business faster at a higher final price. The more you can understand the buyer, the higher likelihood you have of getting acquired. This is completely true because this allows you to understand how buyers are valuing your business and how they're going to see return on investment. For most financial buyers, it's going to be through the cash flow of the business. So if the business is neither growing or profitable, it is extremely hard to sell businesses in those scenarios, especially to financial buyers, if not impossible. So you want to just understand where they're coming from, how they're valuing your business, and what's important to them. Competition creates leverage. The more buyers you have at the table, the higher the chances of receiving multiple offers. So when you go live on acquire.com, you're going to be flooded with buyers initially. They're going to sign NDAs. They're going to look at your listing. They're going to review any materials you have. And that is your opportunity to really capture their interest. Before they even sign the NDA, the first things they're going to look at is the brief description of your business. How are you valuing the company? And that's your opportunity to convert them into an interested buyer. And then from there, once they've said that they're an interested buyer, you want to schedule meetings with them. You want to answer any questions that they have. When one buyer has a good question, you want to take that and share it with another buyer so they have more information. And when you do all this correctly, you're going to be receiving multiple offers. And when you receive multiple offers, you're going to have leverage when you go to pick the final winning buyer. One example I love sharing, this was a job board at about 300,000 in recurring revenue. And leverage was the key in this acquisition. The founder had 3 buyers circling. Instead of choosing the first offer, he kept all at the table. And the result of this was multiple bids, better terms, and a cash-heavy deal. If you have one buyer, you're negotiating from weakness. So if you're in a scenario where one buyer submits an offer, you might be excited to accept that one offer. But I always recommend taking a couple of days, thinking about it, going back to other buyers, letting them know that you've received an offer, you're thinking about taking it, and give them at least an opportunity to submit another offer to acquire your startup. And what this can do is this can lead to competition amongst buyers, which can then give you leverage to negotiate a higher valuation or better terms. As an example, I was working with a founder just last week where he received two different offers from two different buyers. He didn't like the terms of either of them. So he went back to both buyers and said, essentially, I'd love to work with either of you. I have two offers in hand. If we can get a higher percentage of cash on close, I'd be happy to move forward. And one buyer was more than fine with that. He increased his cash on close percentage, and that was a win for the founder. The buyer was happy because he was getting a great business. But if it wasn't for the second offer that gave the founder some leverage, that might not have happened. So creating leverage in an acquisition process is probably the biggest thing you can do to increase the valuation, get better terms, and successfully get acquired. Another tip here is to keep buyers on good terms as well. So let's say you have three different offers. You can only move forward with one buyer. Go back to the other two buyers and just let them know you appreciate their time, you appreciate the offer. And if anything goes wrong with the first buyer, you'll go back to them to potentially sell your business, just in case something does. And then you have a backup buyer that can buy your business in case something falls through. So just another big reminder, how do you justify the higher multiple? These are things that every founder can work on. You can work on margins, you can work on growth, you can reduce churn, you can build new products to enter a larger market size, you can increase product usage. A good tip there would be looking at onboarding to improve the stickiness of the product. As your business goes on, you're going to be more years in business. Strategic partnerships, dominant brand, all of these things increase your valuation, every single one of them. So if you're able to focus on all these things, you're going to have a valuation on the higher end of the multiple curves. But just pick a couple. If you can only fix a few things in your business, or you want to focus on just improving a few things, for SaaS businesses, churn is going to be the big one. Growth rate. For businesses that are slower in growth, focus on profit margin. There's a lot that you can do to increase your profit multiples, or excuse me, your valuation multiple today. So big takeaway from this is if you'd like to sell for more, continue to improve your business and the multiple will keep expanding. Another example of operational efficiency. So a SaaS founder I know doubled his valuation under a year by automating onboarding and cutting churn in half. I see this quite a bit where we'll work with founders and maybe they'd love to sell at a higher multiple, so they go heads down, improving the business. Onboarding, cutting churn in half, that's absolutely massive because buyers don't just pay for today's profit, they pay for tomorrow's potential. Small operational improvements compound into huge valuation gains. So we also see this with buyers as well. If you're interested in acquiring a SaaS business where some founders are no longer interested in working on a business, and these could be opportunities for a buyer to step in and fix. If you're a seller as well with issues such as high churn or low growth rate or something like that, just call that out to the buyer. It's going to be obvious one way or another. But these can also be opportunities for buyers that you can point out. How to increase your valuation? Create an attractive business. Increase your growth rate by automating areas of your business. Improve the CAC to LTV ratio, customer retention, come prepared, and always remember multiple buyers leads to the highest price plus best terms equals the smoothest exit. And one of my favorite quotes at the bottom, if you have one buyer, you have no buyers. And to really summarize everything that I went over in this webinar, why is getting your asking price right important? Number one, it increases your buyer pool. Two, it maximizes cash component of your deal. Three, it helps you sell faster. Four, increases the chance of actually getting acquired. Five, smoothest terms with the fewest closing conditions. And just some quotes from our amazing M&A team at acquire.com. Every week, overpriced startups sit, fairly priced ones get acquired. When buyers see a fair price, they're willing to put more cash on the table. If you price too high, you won't even get a seat at the table. And if you're ready to get your startup acquired, you can definitely list once, reach thousands of buyers instantly, follow up, close, and move on to your next chapter. Get deal ready with support from people who've been there. Let's get you acquired. Start now at acquire.com.